Good evening and welcome to Conversations about Jazz and Other Distractions. I'm Carl Anthony, your host, and this evening we have a really great show for you. But before we get started, I want to thank the Hammonds House Museum, the Fulton County Arts Council, the City of Atlanta Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, AT&T, Time Warner Media, the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta, and NPN, the National Performance Network, for their continued support of the Hammonds House Museum, and they're making this program possible. Again, good evening, and we have two ladies who over several decades have been directing the careers of jazz musicians and have become two of the country's leading artist managers. Please welcome my guests, Gail Boyd, president of Gail Boyd Artist Management, and Karen Kennedy, owner and president of 24/7 Artist Development. Ladies, it's such a pleasure to have you here on my show. Let's begin with the obvious. And we know the pandemic has devastated the entertainment industry. How has it affected your business, and what are you doing to navigate through these new waters?
So, I knew you were going to throw that to me. So, on March 12th, let's just say, I was looking at a calendar that wasn't chock full, but it was a nice, healthy calendar. I represent 8 artists, and it was a nice, healthy calendar, and I was looking forward to 2020. Lakeisha Benjamin, one of my clients, had a 2-night run at Dizzy. She did the first night on March 12th, and then they closed everything down on the morning of March 13th. So I went from looking at a fairly healthy calendar for 2020 to within a week and a half, every single date I had on my calendar for every single artist I had was canceled. And that's what happened. You know, the beginning of the pandemic was a new way of looking at what it is that Karen and I do. So what I've done in the meantime is try to, my grandmother would call it making a way out of no way, you know. And I've still had releases come out. I've had 3 releases during the pandemic. I've started thinking and trying to think of other new ways for my clients to earn a living in the meanwhile. And I've been really active with some other groups like the Blacksmiths. Karen and I are both on Blacksmiths, where we're working with racial equity issues. I've been working with the Jazz Coalition, where we raised $103,000 and gave $1,000 to 103 jazz musicians. And then I've been working also with, just recently, an organization called Lift Every Vote, where we're trying to get musicians out on the street to just encourage people from October 3rd to November 3rd to go out and vote. So that's what I've been doing.
Wow, that's amazing. Karen?
So on around that same date that Gail mentioned, around March 12th or March 14th, I had a band in Europe on a tour, and they were on their second date of a month-long tour. And I was watching TV at late one night, and I saw the president say, "Well, we're shutting everything down, and whoever is out there better get home before Friday." And this was Thursday. Better get home before Friday because we're closing the airports. And I literally happened to be watching TV, and I called the manager of one of the other musicians, and I said, "Did you just hear this? We've got to get these guys home." And they were literally literally on the way from London to a small town in Portugal. And I had to figure out how to get them home safely, quickly. And then later I had to find out how we were going to pay for it, which is typical of a manager's daily life. How are you going to pay for stuff? They got home, they were fine. And since then, it has been a mixture of trying to, as Gail said, trying to help our clients find other sources of income. But I think even more importantly, trying to help keep their sanity. Because with musicians, or any artist really, they spend so much of their day focused on getting inspired from what's around them, from looking within, from being in a place where they can emote freely and feel other people's vibes and energy and turn that into a source of sometimes beauty, sometimes ugliness, but it's a source of expression. So I think a lot of my time in these last few months has been spent working with clients to help them sort of get their focus again and figure out how they're going to move forward. Tangentially, I teach at the Herbie Hancock Institute for Jazz. And so I've been working with some of those students. We just finished a semester, so we had their graduation. So I've been doing that. And then trying to figure out what is my next step, not just as a manager, but as a lover and preserver of the arts, and how do I want to use this time to get inspired.
Amazing. Because it has, I don't think we've ever seen the brakes been put on an industry like this pandemic has put the brakes on. And, over the past 8 shows, we've talked to a bunch of musicians who, are going crazy because they always were able to find something to do to take their mind off of their solitude or, really hunkering down and composing because now they have the free time to do it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different avenues that they've all taken to cope with this pandemic. So it's interesting to hear, Gail, you said you had 3 new releases issued.
Yeah, I did.
But, in my mind, it's always been, you hear it being played live.
Right.
But that piece has now been yanked out of the equation.
Exactly.
How do you get that music still out there?
That's actually the saddest part about it all, because I think in this industry, we had sort of gotten used to the idea that jazz musicians would go out on the road on tours and sell their music on the road for their income. There is income to be made right now with streaming and other things. And if you are with a major label, then if you want with one of the majors who actually own some of the streaming companies, they're making money. The streaming companies are certainly making money. But artists, I think we realize, have lost our ability to make money from our own product with the methods that we've been using in the past. So if there's any good news about it, is that now that has come crystal clear to all of us in the industry, that we've got to rethink how we make money on our own music.
Now, I was 24 in Manhattan back in the 70s, producing concerts and showcases. And I was working with a company called Turtle 2 Productions when you were setting up your law firm.
Yes.
You were like the first Black female law firm in New York City. That's like
in the country, actually. We found out later on. Okay. We thought it was New York City. Then we found out through the American Bar Association that it was New York State. And then on further research, they said actually they couldn't find in 1985 another all Black female law firm.
What made you, did you originally start in entertainment law?
I did, but I was also doing labor law and racial equity work, because really entertainment law is really just a combination of contract law and labor law. It's really, when you think about entertainment law, it's those 2 things combined. And so I was doing work in that as well as entertainment. Okay. You don't start out as a brand new lawyer doing entertainment law because nobody trusts you. You know,
you got to make your bones, right?
Got to do something first.
Hey, Karen, you started out in
many things.
Environmental internship program. So you were director of Southern California.
So I was director of an environmental internship program, which was geared towards college students and graduates. And I was director of a Southern California branch of a national program. And basically what I did was to do a lot of job development, recruitment employee recruitment, and program development around the issues of environmental climate change, environmental, residential hazards, and clean air, clean water, all of that. That was a position that I held right before I came into the music industry, but I was actually trained in the world of higher education and counseling. And so when I first got out of college, I worked at a number of colleges doing both research as well as career counseling. And I was a dean at a small liberal arts college in Southern California. And then I went into the environmental field, which was great, really sort of prepared me for another job that I held, which actually got me into the entertainment industry.
So on that note, how did y'all jump from where you started into the entertainment industry? You were at record labels, and Karen, and Gail, you into entertainment law. What was the bridge that got you both into the entertainment industry?
Well, for me, it was I was working at this environmental internship program, and I took a leave from there. And I was basically I was working on my PhD. In higher ed. I said I'm going to take 6 months off, and I'm going to figure out what I really want to do. And what I wanted to do was to be more in the arts field. And it just so happened at the same time, I had a cousin who was working at A&M Records, and they were looking for someone to run an internship program for the entertainment industry. And so I went to A&M and started up a program called Yes to Jobs. And it was for minority high school students, and giving them a behind the scenes look and experience at how the entertainment industry is run, whether it was through television stations, retail stores, music labels, radio stations. It sort of ran the gamut. And I started this program, which was a national program, and we developed a pipeline of training students who were of color to be prepared to work. Primarily, it was all in the entertainment industry. It was heavily towards music. And from there, it was very successful. It's still running to this day. And some of the people who graduate from that program are now producers. They head up record labels. They're on television. They're fantastic contributors. And that sort of started my entry into the music industry. That was housed at A&M Records. I continued from there to go into marketing at A&M. And from there, I was tapped to run a small record label by two of the preeminent producers in R&B, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And I started their first label, Perspective Records. And then so I come at it from the label system, and then eventually went into management.
Okay. Gail?
Well, I was practicing law and enjoying it. But it was kind of empty, because I would look at contracts for people, or I would negotiate contracts, and then they would take the contract and leave me, and I would still be in my office just wondering what people did after the contract was signed. And it just so happens that I was fortunate enough to represent Betty Carter.
Yes.
And Betty Carter was doing this big concert in Boston with strings and all of that. And I thought, well, I want to do that. I want to go with you up to Boston. I want to help with this and that. And she said to me, "Oh, what you're talking about is artist management. It's not entertainment law." And I thought, my first thought actually was, wow, you mean I spent all that time and money getting a law degree only to find out that's not what I wanted to do? That was my first thought. But my second thought was to really explore what is artist management. I had never really heard about it actually. And so I started thinking about, I was still practicing law, but I started thinking about it. And my first foray into management was with reggae bands. And with a friend of mine, we started One Under the Sun. And I represented Mikey Dredd, and we worked with Frankie Paul and Bunny Brissett and all those people. And then finally, one day in my law office, I got an email from a woman named Vanessa Rubin. And
Yes.
she wanted me to negotiate her management contract with someone else. So I was looking at the contract, and it was really pretty bad. They wanted a lot of the percentage, and they wanted to have like total control. And, it just wasn't a good contract. And so I said that to her. I said, this is really not a really good contract for you, even though you're starting out. And she said, well, why don't you manage me? And I thought, okay, let's try it. And that's how I got into artist management in 1991.
Oh, cool. So
if I could just interject something,
go
because
ahead.
it's so much of artist management, I think, and talk about people who start here. It's these kinds of situations. It's the coming together. It's about the match that worked. And I think for Vanessa and Gail, it was the right match at the right time. And it was very fruitful for both of them. And I remember when my very first client was Eric Reed, and he was one of the students that I had hired for the Yes to Jobs program years before I was going to even thought about being a manager. And he came to me and said, oh, I've got this contract. There's this label that's interested in, and, what should I do? And I'm like, well, this is what I think you should do, but you need some, representation. And the same thing is like, well,
why don't you do it?
Can we work together? Yeah.
So, Gail, your company's called Artist Management. Karen, yours is Artist Development. What is the difference between management and development? Or do y'all like cross certain paths in terms of what you do? Or do I come to you to develop me before I go to Gail to get managed?
Yes.
I mean, what does a young artist have to
do? Well, yeah, because that would run into another company that we jointly own called Vanguard Arts, but we'll get into that later.
We'll talk that later, right? Okay.
So, yes to all of your questions. Actually, the way I think both Gail and I see management is that it is both artist development as well as artist management simultaneously. One doesn't leave the other. I chose that label for my company because I came out of I guess I came out of a philosophy and a practice of career development. So I look at artist management as the entire career of the artist. No matter how long they end up staying with me, that's the perspective that I take. And so we're talking about structuring a career. We talk about goals and how do we, we talk about values. What kind of values do you want to maintain? Your work values, your career values, what kind of goals. Gail does a lot of the same thing in her practice, but a lot of managers don't do that. It just so happens that Gail and I are very similar in, I think, how we approach artist management. I just distinguish it label-wise a little bit differently.
So I think it's also too because Karen came out of the record company system, so the notion of developing an artist sounds very organic to what she was already doing. And I just heard about artist management and never thought about artist development. But as she said, we pretty much view it the same way.
So for argument's sake, shows like Empire, where you see the company steering the artist the way they do, stories of Clive Davis, Whitney Houston's career, and is there a, for lack of a better term, ongoing war between record execs and managers in terms of how careers are steered? Or do you sit back and let the record label do what they do?
Go ahead, Gail.
No, I was just shaking my head so you could talk.
Oh, well, okay. I'm gonna talk for both of us,
Okay.
and that's gonna be held to the no. That's something else that Gail's grandmother would say.
Okay.
But no, there's never a war because neither Gail nor I approach a label or an agent or anyone else as an adversary. We
Right.
look at this as a collective team, and we try to figure out how can we best move forward, because the person at the core of it is the artist. And it's what is in their best interest. I think all of our moves, the moves that we make, are, does this move the artist forward in their goals that they've stated, where they want to arrive? And so we look in terms of that kind of prism. Empire is a very accurate depiction, however, of the entertainment industry, about labels, about artists, about managers, about agents. It's very accurate in a lot of ways. Of course, it's bumped up, for the viewing public, but
right.
There is, I think, it's interesting. I was having a conversation today with a small label out of the UK that one of my clients is on, and this is the head of the label, and he was saying, he's like, I just don't understand about American labels, why they continue to try to tell artists what they think is best for them and what's going to get them the right kind of attention in the public. He says, I don't understand that. It's really up to the artist. And this is a label head saying that. And that I think that is oftentimes remains the case, that there are labels who feel that they know best for the artist, and they're not paying attention to the artist because they're not willing to listen to the artist. So just to throw back to the artist development part, part of I think when I think about artist development, it's about listening and understanding what the other person is saying, and our job is to help them develop strategies for what they consider is important to them. And we have conversations about what those strategies might look like, but it is way out of my interest to tell somebody what they should do or how they should do it.
So, but you do recommend certain things, and you
Absolutely.
throw out ideas for branding, how the person's going to dress, how they're going to present themselves on stage to the audience, so that.
So my philosophy is, it's already inside of you. My job is to help them to unzip themselves and to pull back the layers and to reveal what's inside. That's my job. Because branding has to match with who that individual is. They have to figure out, what is it that makes me unique? What is it that I have to say? How do I want to say it? My job is to help them to feel, get to that point where they can do those things, where they can reveal themselves, and then to help them to own it. Now, if someone says, I really want to be expressive in how I look physically, then it has to relate to who they are. It can't just be, I want to wear a purple hat and have blue hair and wear a skirt. It's that has to reflect who they are. Otherwise, it's inauthentic, and people pick up on that. So, right. I mean, to get back to your original question about how labels can sometimes dictate what someone looks like, that it happens less now. Yeah. But it, you can still sort of see how people are sort of especially younger artists are encouraged to, be more street, to be more something that they're not.
Yeah, I remember watching the interview with David Letterman and Jay-Z on his My Next Guest show, and he was like, "So, is everybody gangster?" He was like, "No, 90% of these guys out here don't even know what gangster is."
Right. Right.
Yeah. The two of you have collectively managed some of the biggest names in jazz, such as David Sanchez, Don Braden, John Clayton, the Clayton brothers, Betty Carter, Tommy Flanagan, Stephon Harris, Jackie Terrason. And looking over your bios and your accolades, you both at one point or another have represented Kenny Barron and Gretchen Parlato.
No, only Karen.
No.
I did some legal work for both of them.
That's representing.
Okay, all right.
Same thing, you know.
So long as we're clear.
And in all fairness, Gail, as you can tell, we are very close, and our clients happen to be very close with each other too. And if one of us isn't around, but the other one is, then we are their manager in absentia or something. But you know, our clients are very comfortable with each other, you know, with both of us, and so in that way, I think we do share.
We can say we share. Okay.
We share.
Okay, good. Because, and before we get into, you know, I want to show a couple of images of those two, because I'm sure everybody recognizes and knows Kenny Barron because he's been out there for so long. But a handful of people are familiar with Gretchen Parlato. Is there a different approach that you take in managing, develop male artists than female artists?
No, not in terms of gender. The difference is there is a difference in how you manage a developing artist and an established artist. There's a big difference because the arena is different, and a lot of times the work is different. And it's funny to bring up Gretchen because she's been on hiatus for about 6 years, raising. She got married, had a son, and now we just did an album. We're going to release a new album at the top of the year in 2021, and that's what also presents a difference when someone has been away from the scene for a while, out of a chosen lifestyle, and then returning with something to say. How do we manage that? That's a little bit different from somebody who, like Kenny Barron, who has never left the scene since he started when he was 16, and he's now 70 something ish,
right?
Mid 70s. So I think that's the difference. It's not so. I don't really find a difference in terms of men and women. It's more in terms of what stage they're in when I start working with them.
Okay, so we're going to take a little break because, again, like I said, a lot of people don't know who Gretchen is, and we're going to listen to a little piece of a Simply Red song that she did,
yes,
on her Live in New York City album, which I love. I just love it. So, and then we'll come back because I want to ask you both how y'all became such good friends. We'll do that after the music.
That's the story.
Okay.
Holding back the years, thinking of the fear I've had so long. When somebody hears, listen to the fear that's gone.
That's all I can say. She has such a wonderful style of phrasing and just delivery that, separates, and I find that's what separates vocalists from singers. Pretty much in my mind, anybody can sing a song, but to really make it your own and really emote the feeling in the lyric is what a vocalist does.
Yeah.
So back to the original question. How did y'all become such good friends?
Take it away, Karen.
This is on you, Gail.
But let me just preface this. One of the things I love about Gail is that she has this tremendous ability to remember all these details and to tell a story with such enthusiasm, but you're always accurate for the most part.
Except I can't remember his name. Who kept saying we should meet?
Billy Banks.
Billy Banks. Okay.
Oh wow.
So,
okay.
Right. So I'm managing artists in New York. Karen's managing artists in California. And every time I would see Billy Banks, he would say, "You got to meet my friend Karen Kennedy. She's a manager. She's great. You two would love each other." Every time he'd be on the West Coast, he'd say to Karen, "You got to meet my friend Gail Boyd, because she's a manager and you two would love each other." And that went on for maybe 6 or 7 months.
Wow.
So finally, we were at a Jazz Times convention. That's how long ago it was. And I needed help, putting out some flyers or something. And Billy Banks grabbed Karen by the hand, grabbed me by the hand, pushed us two together and said, "Here, you two, talk." Karen and I went and sat on the steps in the hotel and bonded immediately. It was like love at first sight. So I talked her within about 10 minutes into giving me her credit card.
No, not 10 minutes. Don't make me look that bad. It was an hour. An hour.
Okay. So within an hour,
she's got skills. That's not one of them.
Time. Yeah, time is like that's one of my. So within an hour, I had talked her into giving me her credit card because I had already decided I was going to go to France to meet them. This woman had met me like an hour before. She gave me her credit card. I bought her a flight on her credit card, and we went, to France. I did buy it. Then we went to France to meet them, and it's been on ever since. It's just been like, I actually don't remember when we weren't friends.
Wow. That's amazing.
And we set up, I remember I flew into because I was living in LA at the time. I flew into New York. And then we went, I met her at JFK, and it was an overnight flight, of course. And I don't know, 8-9 hours. And we set up and talked the entire way.
Time.
Wow.
And then we bonded. I'll tell you when we really bonded.
Ice skating.
You got it. We had
in Central Park or Rockefeller Center?
No. This is the same trip. This is in Cannes,
okay.
France, and we had rented a little apartment because we couldn't afford to stay at the hotel. We rented some little apartment, and they had this little square, like maybe a 10-inch, 13-inch black and white TV. We turned it on, and they had the European Championships on, ice skating championships, and we're like, oh, and I love ice skating. Gail loved ice skating, but we didn't know that about each other until that trip. And so we sat there with our glass of wine, our bread and cheese, and cornichon. And and cornichon is a fancy word for tiny pickles, but but we were in France and we were eating cornichon and watching figure skating.
Absolutely, it was on after that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And clearly, if you're taking a trip an hour after meeting to Cannes, you definitely were meant to be together.
That's what we think.
Yeah.
When I got into the business back in the early 70s in DC, I started out delivering tickets and concert posters to record stores.
Oh yeah, you're the promo guy.
To radio stations, getting, the personalities to hawk the show and to come host it, and taking out small ads in the industry publications, and Billboard, Cashbox, and R&R
Yep.
were
Yeah.
the Bibles back then in the 70s.
Yep.
Are they still
And
relevant
Monday Morning
today?
Quarterback.
Right. Are they still relevant today, or has
They don't
social
exist,
media
first of
played a
all.
bigger part in the numbers and the
R&R doesn't exist.
Okay.
Monday Morning Quarterback doesn't exist. What was the other two? Billboard still exists.
Billboard and Cashbox.
Yeah. So, and then Cashbox, I don't think is so relevant as is Polestar or one of the other services. But those are trades. Those are all trades. So it was important to the people at the label. It was important to some degree to management. Artists, I think the only thing that's ever been relevant is Billboard, because Billboard tracks sales.
Right, exactly.
So you always wanted to be able to be on the charts, whether it was an R&B chart or a jazz chart, whatever it was. You wanted to be on the charts, and you wanted to be moving up the charts, and you would love to get to that top 10 or top 5 or number 1. But that's the only trade that's relevant. More important is definitely social media, and it's to some degree. Gail had mentioned Spotify earlier. Spotify is important in terms of exposure and people knowing your music, but unless you are actually trending on Spotify and you're actually getting over a million hits, then you're certainly not making any money.
Right.
And so more important to me is just social media.
Just letting people know that the music is out there and where they can find it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I see, across my phone, Google will always drop 2 or 3 new artists or, songs that they have done on their albums. And I get that like daily. So it's like, oh, okay, Diana Krall's doing something. Oh, okay, they done found the lost Coltrane.
So there are. I mean, there's Apple Music, of course. There's Amazon. Right. There's for the jazz followers. There's jazz is jazz times downbeat in terms of both websites and print versions. But in terms of charts, you're really looking at Apple Music and Amazon, and those are based on sales. So that has some. It's not airplay. It's not and sales both in terms of digital downloads, which for the first time has overtaken physical copies, and singles as well as albums.
Now when I was talking to Christian about being able to, back in the day, you dropped the wax on the turntable, you sat there and listened and read the liner notes. Are you finding that the digital downloads are for single songs in the jazz world, or are they actually downloading the complete albums?
Both, but one of the things I like about digital is the ability to drop singles in jazz, and that's something you were never able to do when you just released a whole album. So, I've just in one of these albums that's going to be released tomorrow, Brianna Thomas, we've already dropped 2 singles and started selling those singles, but the album's not coming out until tomorrow. So, I like it for that. Yeah. You make a little bit of money, but you also let people know what's coming, because you get a little bit of press and people start talking about that. So I like that part for digital. And especially now that the pandemic is here and there's almost no other way to purchase it anyway, we're doing hard copies, but primarily for radio and press. But, people can buy it digitally. It's helping us.
Switching gears, I've seen a ton of women come out of universities and colleges and music programs, but seldom do I see them included in bands, is there still a I feel there's a gender inequality in terms of the women who are playing that aren't included in big bands like Sherry Miracle's Diva Jazz Orchestra, but on the trio, quartet, or quintet level, one of the few people I saw was Kenny Barron, who included a couple of women in his quintet. But for the most part, it's still a man's game. Why is that from a management perspective?
Well, do we want to do a whole nother session?
Okay.
No, I mean we should because it's very much of a valid point. So I'd like to point out a couple of things. Yes, I think it is definitely still predominantly male. I think things are shifting with the roles that Terry Lynn Carrington, Ingrid Jensen, Diane Reeves. There have been some really key people, Regina Carter, who've really taken it upon themselves to not just change the image, but to change, and not just to change the narrative, but to change the actual workforce. And
Didi Bridgewater, Didi and Talani Bridgewater.
Yep. Yeah. And that requires a lot of not just dedication, it's a lot of sacrifice, because they have got to be willing, and it takes a lot of risk, because they have all put their careers on the line to say, I demand that we get this kind of pay. I demand that I get to choose my band, not you, promoter, who would like to see, name a bunch of other people, but I know who can best play my music. And they've had to really fight very hard for that say. And all of them have said, okay, it's not just about my band. It's not just about what I'm doing, the bandstand that I'm on, but it's about creating a bandstand that other women and other men can look towards to say, yes, we can reconfigure this.
Yeah, because there's hundreds of qualified women out there who can play, and yet there's only a handful of leaders and very few female sidemen when you go to jazz clubs. And one of my other guests was like, well, she was saying she had to play herself down and be one of the boys without being one of the boys, because they look at her as, this pretty thing. And it's like, and I never had that problem when I would hire musicians, see female leads. The prettier, the better for me, because I'm not hiring you for your looks necessarily. I'm hiring you for your expertise, for your music. And I never saw a difference between a woman who can play a saxophone and a man who can play a saxophone. If they can play, you can play.
I think Karen and I would both say to that young woman that you're talking about, though, not to play herself down. That becomes a slippery slope. And if she's pretty or whatever, if she can just continue in the vein that anybody would with knowledge, skills, and ability to play her instrument, that has to count. And those are the sacrifices Karen was just talking about. You may, it may take you a little bit longer to get there, but don't play yourself down. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Do your thing.
All right, ladies, pay attention. Wisdom is speaking right now. So, when you were saying the promoter wants to dictate the band, is that like a label promoter wants to dictate the band? Because when I hired bands for concerts, whoever they brought was on stage. I didn't have any input in terms of who.
You would be surprised how many times you will call and say, oh, you're bringing, X number of person. Who else is in the band? And then you say, who else is in the band? Well, had you thought about getting this person? And I'm saying, you're hiring the leader, and you should trust the leader's ability to
Mhm.
bring who's going to best complement his or her music. But that is a fight that you have
Okay.
quite often, and you have it even with some of your bigger artists, not just the ones starting out.
Oh,
I had
wow.
someone call me today and say, "Oh, I really love to get so and so on the stage and do this all-star event." And I'm like, "Well, that's great, but this person really doesn't care to do all-star events. This person prefers to perform their music with their
Mhm.
bands, of which there's a number of them." And it's like, "Oh, well, I didn't really mean all-stars. I meant like all masters." I said, "Yeah, well, those are the same thing. All masters." The point is, they, like what Gail says, trust the artist, that they know how to share their music in the way they intend it.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes,
Because there is a language on that stage that those musicians have to understand
that's right.
and be able to speak to each other regardless of who composed the music.
Yes,
And it's like if I'm coming in speaking French and everybody else is speaking Spanish,
there's the
I'm
problem.
lost. you know. So um, you know, you were mentioning earlier that Gretchen took 6 years off.
Mhm.
Most of the audience doesn't understand, and I was one of them in the early days that, you see some artists are dropping albums every year, sometimes twice a year, and other artists is takes 10 years before they get another, album out. Is it the industry, the label, or financially prohibitive, or do the artists just take much longer to compose music to actually record?
No, this is really all by the artist's choice. I mean, I have a client who likes to record, every single year
Mhm.
because he's got something he wants to say and he has the ability uh, to put it together in a way in which he wants to say it. I have other clients who feel like who are very comfortable waiting until they have something they want to say, and they feel like it's important to be heard. It's I don't think there's any timetable.
Mhm.
It's and this is sort of the advice I give to all musicians. It's recording something because you've written it, you've
Mhm.
composed it, or because it's current is okay, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be heard. If you feel like I've just got to document this period in my life, go ahead and document it.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that it needs to be heard by the world at this point in time, if ever. You have to be honest with enough with yourself to take a critical eye to it and a critical ear. The I think one of the problems we've had, and Gail and I have had this discussion a lot about, there's such a preponderance of product out there, and certainly that's a result of social media and digitalization. Anybody can now record an album or an EP or a single and put it out there. It doesn't mean, number one, that it's worthy of somebody spending $10 on. They
Mhm.
will tell you whether it is, because either they'll buy it or they won't. And it doesn't mean that it needs to be in a crowded field just because you can do it.
Right. Um, you both volunteer a lot. You sit on boards of uh, major jazz organizations. But there's two I want to talk about: the International Women in Jazz. Gail, I think you sit on that board, right?
I did. I was one of the founders, actually, maybe 20
Okay.
something years ago. I have not been on that board, nor have I been active with it in a really long time, but I was one of the founders and one of the board people of it
Now,
years
what do
ago.
they actually do?
Um,
Um,
what you were talking about earlier, and that is trying to provide a voice for
okay.
women, particularly instrumentalists, because if there's anybody who can get a gig, is a vocalist more so than some of the female
Right.
instrumentalists, although International Women in Jazz represented both vocalists and instrumentalists, but that was the thrust.
Okay. And Karen, International Association of African American Music.
Which I'm no longer on either. That was about 20 years ago, but that was a group. It was primarily it was based out of Philly. It was primarily R&B, but some links to Black American music, I should say. But that isn't a group that I've been affiliated with for a while now. I'm sorry to say, but it was definitely something that propagated the importance of African American music.
Okay. So now it's 2019. Two
Or
best
2020.
friends have launched Vanguard Arts, and but you still have 24/7, and you still have Gail Boyd. What does Vanguard Arts do that your two other entities don't do?
Glad you asked.
Yeah.
Gail, it's all yours.
Karen.
So as you can tell, Gail and I are very close friends. We spend a lot of time talking about stuff. And initially, we launched Vanguard Arts with artists in mind, looking at the gap and how artists were functioning if they were not signed to a label or to a manager or to a booking agent. And we each individually got a lot of calls for help with some of these individuals. And so we decided we were going to address those needs. We couldn't take them on in our own respective firms because our own rosters were as much as we could handle. So we came up with a way to address the need, and that was just by providing consulting services to artists. And sometimes that meant that we'd work with their recording projects, or do project managing or preparation for a tour. But basically they were customized specific to those artists' needs. So that was like a micro view. And then we started looking at the macro view, with society as a whole, and how three entities, the music industry, the arts, and society work together or not. Gail and I started having conversations about what was working, why were we not intersecting where there's a great need for that, and what role art is playing. And we recognize that particularly together, but individually, we had skills in some of our prior career trajectories that would be helpful to answer those questions. So we decided to bring together our knowledge, our skills, our abilities, our interests to address the needs that we saw. And that's how we started. We are about to enter into a major conference, arts conference called Western Arts Alliance and Midwest Arts that starts next week. And we'll be presenting some of these ideas at this conference. And it's basically a way in which we can bring together artists, presenters, the arts, and corporations to address how we can articulate the benefits of the arts and the importance the role of the arts can play in whether it's communication skills or leadership development or issues of diversity and inclusion, using particularly jazz as a means to not just tell a historically accurate narrative, but to demonstrate ways in which we can address some problem solving with the skills that we've learned in jazz.
Okay,
that's it in a nutshell.
That is it in a nutshell, definitely. So I'm a young artist, still wet behind the ears, behind a manager or a developer.
What do you want? That would be our first question to you. What are your needs? Why are you here? Why did you call us? What's going on in your life?
Okay.
That you feel you need help? Because you have to be able to say, I'm ready to do fill in the blanks. I'm ready to record. I'm ready to tour. I'm ready to hire a band. Because there are a lot of clients, not even clients, there are a lot of musicians who will come to you and say, I need a manager, and they're not working any place at all. Nobody knows who they are. They're not even working at their neighborhood pizza shop on Friday nights. And so they may not need a manager. So the first question that we would ask of you when you call me and say, hi, Gail, my name is John and I need a manager, I'll say, why? That really is like the first question. And if you say, well, I'm thinking of recording and I'm just coming out of school and I heard from my teacher that I need a manager as soon as I graduate. So then you have, if they strike a little bit of interest in you, because actually you turn down more than you can accept because we're just individuals and we can't take everybody. But if there's something about that person that strikes your fancy and you would engage them further, then they have to develop for you why you should be interested in taking them on. And a lot of people are not ready, simply, for management.
All right. 5 quick questions before we wrap this up. You're stranded on an island. What 5 CDs would you take?
John Coltrane and Johnny Hartman.
Okay.
Don't remember the name of it, but that's one for sure.
Ballads.
That's the name of it.
Oh, ballads, yes.
Ballads.
Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Shaft with Isaac Hayes. John Coltrane's Spiritual. And John Coltrane's Crescent.
Wow.
Okay, so this is one of Gail's skill sets.
Okay.
Really, she's always good at that. And ballads is certainly one for me. Curtis Mayfield, live, that has, I can't remember. Anyway, Curtis Mayfield. Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. Kenny Barron. I can't decide whether it should be Night in the City or I don't know, but a Kenny Barron album.
Good one.
Yeah, it could be it could be a lot of things, but anyway, Kenny Barron. And 5 would be I don't know, my playlist, my own personal playlist.
Okay.
That doesn't count.
Right.
No, it doesn't count.
I'll come back to number 5.
Name something.
Okay, Marvin Gaye. I'll do Marvin.
Okay. There you go.
Best vacation spot ever.
Oh.
Oof. Vacation. What's a vacation?
I know.
I
had one. I did have one when I was back in college administration because I had summers off and I had money.
Karen and I have been on every continent together.
Oh, really?
Well, we haven't been in Australia together.
No.
But we've been in South America, North America, Europe, Asia. We haven't been to Antarctica. But vacation, I mean, I find myself having a good time wherever I go.
I know, pretty much.
So,
cool. Favorite food, dessert, or restaurant?
A good taco.
Okay. Right.
Oh no, I take it back. Take it back. No. a good shrimp po' boy.
Oh, ooh. All right.
And there's a place here in LA.
Easy.
Okay, so yeah, true. That's where my mom's from. But here in LA, there's a great place called Orleans in York, and they have about 4 different locations. One's right by the airport. They're the best, and they make their own bread. So,
Gail,
biscuits. My favorite food.
All right. What are you reading now?
I am reading Caste.
Mm-hmm.
I am reading. What's the? Oh my God! I actually thought I had it here. The guy who wrote the Miles Davis. I mean the James Baldwin thing. Eddie Glaude.
Eddie Glaude.
Oh, Eddie Glaude. Yeah, Eddie Glaude.
I'm reading him. Okay. And Purple Hibiscus with Chimamanda Adichie. Purple Hibiscus.
Okay. That's funny you mentioned her because I just reread America.
That's good too.
Yeah,
The
which is
purple
good.
hibiscus is like,
Okay. All right. So I'll read that next. So I just reread America, which is Amerikkkkah.
right.
And then I'll show you, because it just happens to be right here. I'm reading Tyranny, which is really easy to read on tyranny because it's, I don't know, 50 pages and it's great for the times that we live in. And then that's about it. I was just saying I need to pick up another book, but there's a bunch on my list. That's what I'm reading now.
And last question, what do you do to get away from your job? Hobby?
Drink.
Oh, okay. There you are, Gail.
No,
I
I'm
thought
just
she
kidding.
just drove you away with that one.
But
I hope it's
so
Well,
no,
I take violin lessons. I was taking violin lessons before the pandemic.
okay.
I swim. I swim, and that's the best thing is physical exercise for me, and I try to do it every morning. So at the very least, I've done something for myself that day, and no matter what happens the rest of the day, I feel like I've paid some attention to me.
Ladies, it has been such a pleasure talking to you this evening.
It's
It really,
been
really
fun.
has.
Thank you.
And as always, I learn from the feet of the masters. And yes, you two are powerhouses.
Oh,
And
there's
look who just
Beatrice.
showed up. It's Beatrice.
Yay.
Yay.
Look at you with your lovely haircut.
Hello,
know.
ladies.
How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much. Carl was great. Thank you. But I have to say, thank y'all for joining us this evening.
Oh, it was so much fun.
It's
We
fun.
appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Somebody just
we
said no
appreciate you.
women. Somebody just said no women on our desert island, and I have to add a Sarah Vaughan in there. So I got to have 6. I'm not
Okay,
taking anybody
so-
off. I'm gonna add
okay.
Sarah Vaughan.
Fine. That's fine.
Okay, I would, who would I add? God, there's so many. There's so many to choose from. Minnie Riperton.
Okay.
Ooh, good one. Good one.
Yeah, that was back when I was in junior high.
Yeah, right. Beatrice, thank you,
Wow.
and Carl, thank you for having us. It really has been a lot of
Yeah.
fun. I've enjoyed it so much.
And I thank you all for it. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh no, it's just great to see Leatrice because normally we would have seen her at conferences, and since we're not doing that these days, but just great news for you, and we're excited that we're going to be working together even more.
Yeah, we will be working together more in the future.
Yeah, but and can we just say, talk about powerhouses, and that is Leatrice.
Yes.
When I first came into
doubt.
the industry,
Yes.
when I first came to this industry, that was a word, especially as a manager. She was the name I had heard about, and I was so intimidated to meet her.
Down
I
in
was so
Atlanta,
intimidated.
Right? Down in Atlanta at the Black Arts Festival.
Black
We're
Arts
like,
Festival.
ooh,
I was
you gotta
so
know
intimidated
Beatrice.
because
Like,
she had
who
this
is
huge
Beatrice?
festival, and she knew all these people, and I could see
Yeah.
her, and everybody loved her, and I was just like, oh, I wonder how to meet her and how to impress her. And
Girl.
no, it's true. And so
Hey.
what? And it's true. I mean, but you have paved the way for so many people.
Yes,
But you've been such a standard bearer for Black women and for Black arts. And I love that about you, and that you found so many different ways to tell that story and to make a difference, regardless of what you do.
I agree.
Thank you so much. That is like, y'all gonna make me cry. Thank you so
Go
much.
ahead, girl, cry.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And
True,
thank
though.
you. And it's
It's
good
true.
that people appreciate the work, you know?
Absolutely.
So thank you. And then, of course, the work that you all do. I mean, I've always been impressed. And when Carl and I were even talking about this, and I was like, we got to call Gail and Karen.
Yeah.
Like, we need people to understand the other side
Thank
of
you.
this business, and no better people to tell that story. I mean, the commitment that you all have made to this, into this work has been phenomenal. And there's so many, you talk about me, there's so many people that have benefited from your work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And you two
Okay,
ladies
well,
are
now
two of the
I think
top
we can
names that come
shut
up.
it up.
You want to close it out, Lee?
Yeah, well, I do want to close it out. And Carl, of course, thank you as always. But I also want to let our audience know that the Elevate Festival is coming up. And so not only do I get to be the executive director of the Hammons House Museum, I get to curate this year's Elevate Festival. And it's all virtual. Ravi, who is our producer here, I drag Ravi around along with me like, girl, come on, we gotta go curate this festival. We have 7 days starting on October the 4th through the 10th. And we got 56 and a half hours of programming.
Wow.
So it's going to be pretty dope. And Karen and Gail, some of your favorite musicians will be in it.
Okay.
We even got Toshi Reagan down here in conversation.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So being virtual has provided us with an amazing opportunity to reach out to our friends outside of Atlanta and people who have had Atlanta ties and just live in other places. And so it is really going to be a great festival. So everyone, Karen has put it up in the chat, Elevate Arts Festival, October 4th to the 10th. So go to the website, figure out how to connect with us, and you can connect with us all week. So that's what I want to add. But also, thank you all for continuing to rock with us for this show. Carl, you're building a following, Carl, building a pretty good show over here.
Hey,
Look at you.
You're the inspiration. That's all I
Well,
can say. And it's been one of the gifts God has given me to know you, Leatrice.
Y'all, we gotta go. Everybody say goodnight.
We'll talk after this. Ladies, don't go nowhere, okay?
Okay.
But I also want to thank my producer, Rafi Wyndham, and Karen Hatchett for their tireless dedication and love to making this show possible.
Absolutely.
And without them, none of this would have happened. And our next guests coming up in 2 weeks on October 15th are the Young Lions, Morgan Guerin, Henry Conaway, and India Owens.
Oh, nice.
So
Great.
definitely stay tuned, hang out. We'll be back. Good night, ladies.
Good
It's been a
night.
pleasure.